People act. People act. People act. People act.
So a ProPublica investigation in 2016 found that software used to predict inmates' likelihood of being high risk for recidivism was twice as likely to be inaccurate when looking at Black inmates versus white inmates. So these scores are often used in sentencing and parole decisions by judges and affects the way that the criminal justice system treats individual citizens. Historical data produced by the United States criminal justice system would be difficult to make unbiased because of the history of the criminal justice system and race. So we're going to talk about the two types of predictive policing tools that are being used. So the first one can be a location-based predictive policing tool that kind of makes a connection between places, the events that might happen at these places, and then the crime rates. That determines when and where a crime could occur. So that means that if you live in the city, you might see cops driving around your area more. Also, you might see a lot of police at a sporting event. And this happens even though nothing might be happening, but it occurs because of that policing software. The second predictive tool uses the data that they have on people. So usually it looks at their age, their gender. Sometimes it has their history of substance abuse and mostly uses their criminal record. This is done to predict whether or not the person will commit a crime. This information is used in pretrial hearings and sentencing as well. I think this was in Chicago, if I'm not mistaken, but researchers found that some police departments will give officers most wanted lists of people in the areas that they're patrolling that they think are high risk of committing a crime. And in other places with these most wanted lists, police will actually go to the residents' houses and tell them that they are high risk for committing a crime, so they better be careful. And if they do commit a crime, prosecutors will use that warning as a way to get a higher charge for that person. Increasing evidence suggests that human prejudices have been integrated into these tools because machine learning tools are trained on police data. And as we said before, the criminal justice system has a very long history of being really racist. The arrest data used to train predictive tools does not always give an accurate picture of criminal activity. Predictive policing tools, they use arrest data as the machine learning tools, apparently. And this is kind of bad because not everybody who gets arrested is actually convicted of a crime. These tools are most likely to predict minorities of being high crime and high risk, and the neighborhood that they live in as being high crime and high risk as well. Another predictive policing tool is facial recognition. In the scientific community, it's been known that using facial recognition software shouldn't be the biggest piece of evidence because the software isn't 100% accurate. A report found that Black individuals were most likely to be scrutinized by facial recognition software in cases, but they were also inaccurate. The FBI's own research on facial recognition supported that idea. Facial recognition matches should be treated no differently than someone calling in a possible lead from a dedicated tip line. The responsibility still falls on the investigator in an agency to independently establish probable cause to make an arrest. And this is from Richard Rodriguez, an employee at facial recognition vendor Vigilant Solutions. Law enforcement agencies also do not review these programs that they use for racial bias, and they aren't regulated to do so. In some cases, law enforcement doesn't even say that they use the software to help get a person arrested or convicted for a crime. Even if these tools are being used correctly, as we've said previously, the firms creating the software don't even really check to make sure that their software isn't racially biased, and they aren't regulated to do so. So for example, Cyber Extruder, a facial recognition technology company that markets itself to law enforcement, said that they had not performed testing or research on bias in their software. Their response was that certain skin colors are harder for the software to handle given the current limitations of technology. And they actually said it can not work for people who are incredibly pale to people who are darker than me. Hamid Khan, an activist who fought to get the Los Angeles Police Department to adopt the predictive policing tool PredPol, demanded an audit of the tool by the police department's inspector general. And according to Khan, in March of 2019, the inspector general said that the task was impossible because the tool was so complicated. So these companies aren't giving these kinds of notes to the police departments or releasing them to the public, and usually by the time they maybe would do it, the machine learning tool has already learned and changed so much that even if people who knew the algorithms were to try and figure out if it's biased or not, they couldn't be able to do that because it already changed. But also a bigger part of it is that these companies aren't releasing their notes to the departments that they're selling it to. Of course, the people who are going to try to look at it without any background information aren't going to understand it. There are also companies that do their own audits and don't release that information to the public, which is kind of just like, well, what's the point? Or if they do release it to the public, it's like not enough information for people to double check to make sure that what they're saying is correct. So the common response, or the reason why a lot of the companies do that, is because they say that they don't want to give away trade secrets and that they're working with confidential information, so they don't want to give away that confidential information to just anybody. So Twitter has always automatically cropped images to prevent them from taking up too much space on the main feed and to allow multiple pictures to be shown in the same tweet. And the company usually tries to make sure that the algorithmic tools that are being used captures the faces. Depending on how these tools were coded and trained, it can cause a lot of issues. Colin Madland, and he was trying to highlight another algorithmic bias situation in Zoom. Instead, what the Twitter image did was only show Colin's face but not show his colleague's face. I remember like looking at that tweet and being like, what is he talking about? Until I literally clicked the picture and it blew up, I was able to see the situation. Another tweet was this entrepreneur named Tony Arcieri. He did his own little experiment to see what would happen if he did a picture of US Senator Mitch McConnell and former President Barack Obama, and he did two pictures, and those two pictures only showed Mitch McConnell's face and never showed Barack Obama's face. He did other little experiments like changing the colors of their ties, inverting the colors, and maybe brightening and lightening their pictures, and all of those attempts didn't work. It only worked when it was inverted, and that's the only way that it showed both of their faces, and that again is another example of the algorithmic bias. In 2018, it was revealed that Google had simply banned its photo service from ever labeling anything as gorilla, chimpanzee, or monkey after the company's algorithm repeatedly mislabeled images of Black people with those terms. And voice-based assistants like Alexa have struggled to recognize different accents. A Microsoft chatbot on Twitter started spewing racist posts after learning from other users on the platform. Not surprising. So I'm going to give a bit of a trigger warning for some of this because it is going to be talking about government and police violence or just mass incarceration and being an oppressed, marginalized group in society. These softwares are also being used to determine, if you want to know something really funny, my camera's having a hard time tracking my face and my teeth are showing up as white on the camera, on the viewfinder. So it's tracking my teeth and not my face. These softwares are also being used to determine welfare eligibility, the number of police that should be sent to these neighborhoods, and the residents most in need of public health assistance. And this is called smart governance. The Chinese government has actually used artificial intelligence to track and racially profile its largely Muslim, editing ISIS here, it's pronounced Uyghur, so Uyghur community, who about 1 million are believed to be living in internment camps. For medical care, there was actually an algorithm that was used and maybe is still used in US hospitals to distribute healthcare to patients. Instead, it was systematically discriminating against Black people. Researchers were looking at this software and had actually determined that the algorithm that was used was less likely to refer Black people than white people who were equally sick to programs that aim to improve care for patients with complex medical needs. So the way that the algorithm assigned the risk scores to patients was on the basis of their healthcare costs within the past year. And while this assumption might have made sense because higher healthcare costs are usually linked to higher healthcare needs, a closer look at the data revealed that the average Black person was actually more sicker than the white person and had way more frequency in a lot of conditions. But it also showed that their healthcare costs were $1,800 less per year than the care given to a white person and their healthcare costs. And so when researchers actually reworked the algorithm, it went from only 17.7% of patients being Black receiving extra care to 46.5%.